Let me tell you about some upcoming speakers. Our next meeting, which is the first Wednesday, Doug Dewar, who most of you probably know, he's the treasurer of the RAC here in Lake County. He's also an NRA certified instructor, and he's going to come talk to us about gun rights, Second Amendment rights, gun control, concealed carry, all that kind of stuff. So anything you want to know about guns, that'll be the next meeting. The March 18th meeting, which is going to be the second Wednesday, because I scheduled this like 6 months ago, is Bill Federer. He's been here before. He goes all about history and religion and why we need to get back to religion and how that's been affected throughout history. He had a very great presentation last time. It was very well received. And then along that same lines, if you really want to get psyched up, on April 1st, we have Dexter Sanders coming to talk to us. And he, if you were at our conference we had back in the summer, he was one of the speakers with the Liberty Tour. He's a black minister, and he got everybody all riled up and excited. And so come to that meeting on April the 1st and hear him. He's really good. And for our speaker tonight, we didn't get a bio, and I was told it was just fine to say, Bob, the tax collector's here. So, Bob, the tax collector's here. Come on.
Hi. Thanks for having us here tonight. I did not provide a bio just for that very reason. There's no fanfare with me. I have been, for the last 18 years, very privileged to serve you in the capacity of tax collector. I have with me three fellows tonight whom I work with. Mark McKee from the front row. Mark is the manager, runs our South Lake Regional Office, also serves in a very important capacity in our office in a position that's Records Management Liaison Officer, which is responsible for all our record management. That's a position that's actually created by Florida law. Randy Van Alstyne is the director of all motorist services and oversees all our branch offices. And David Jordan, who is our chief of operations, oversees all our administrative functions. When Andy asked us to be here this evening, what we do is not always the most exciting thing in the world. We're the folks that take your money. It's not something that not something that's exciting to talk about for you. We're very excited about what we do because we have the philosophy that the little bit of responsibility that we have in terms of overall government, we can't change the world, but the piece for which we're responsible for, we can do it right, we can do it better than anyone else, and if we fix our piece and the next guy or gal fixes their piece and the next theirs, eventually we'll get this whole government thing right. We go to work every day trying to think of ways to do this job a little bit better. There's never a down day when we take off from doing that. We take very seriously our responsibility to you, and we have a darn good understanding of two things. How you want us to run this office, and for whom we actually work. You go into any of our offices, ask any of our people for whom they work, you won't find one who says for Bob McKee. Everyone will tell you, I work for you. And so we have that understanding. I'm blessed to have these three gentlemen that constitute the majority of our leadership. Working with them every day, day in and day out, is a blessing for me. It's a blessing for you too, because if you knew of their integrity firsthand and the values they bring to the job, and their beliefs in their family and their faith, you'd be proud that they serve you every day. It's a noble calling. We get a lot of bashing of government, but I can tell you there's people, men and women out there every day that are doing everything they possibly can to make life a little bit better for everybody else. So, what's important to me tonight is that I'm answering your questions, providing you with information that I believe is relevant to you, that you'll find interesting. We have a little PowerPoint presentation, but it's not for the purposes of you sitting here and reading it. It's to keep me on track as to the areas of topic I need to cover with you. And so, Randy, if you'll help me with this. Sir. Go to the beginning. There we go. Okay. Things that I want to cover with you tonight. who we are, what we do, and how we do it. Pretty simple subjects, but pretty comprehensive in the answers to these things. Who we are, both past and present. The first piece of this is a little extended, but the last 3 bullet points on here are very relevant to the beliefs of the Tea Party. First off, my job, Florida tax collector, was created in 1885 with the Constitution of Florida. And in 1887, Lake County was formulated by the state legislature, and my job as I have it today was put into place with the other 4 constitutional officers. Since 1887, there's been 7 tax collectors in Lake County. 7. I'm the first Republican. Yay! I'm also the second one that was elected. 5 of the others were appointed by governors, then Democratic governors. And then in 1924, there was an election. The fellow was elected that year. And then since that, I'm the only other one that's been elected. And again, the first elected Republican. Now, this is the only part I want you to read, and I'm going to read it with you because it is so relevant to your beliefs. The framers of our state constitution were both wise and visionary in creating the constitutional offices. Some people will tell you that there's more efficiencies if we just consolidate all these activities. Well, I'm prepared to debate that with anyone. And the reasons. These founders, they were visionary in that they seemed to anticipate the potential for abuses of power, unresponsiveness associated with large centralized government. They established them, the constitutional offices, as independent elected offices in order to address 3 specific concerns and needs. They existed then in 1885, and they exist today. 1, the need to ensure a separation of duties, powers, and responsibilities in a system of checks and balances. 2, the need to ensure that government in the delivery of services, local services, would be responsive and responsible to the citizens we serve. And 3, the need to ensure our ability to deliver those services without being impeded nor unduly influenced. That's the reason that these offices act and function and exist independent of one another. It's absolutely critical to have that in order to have these respective checks and balances. Go ahead, Randy. Okay, so that's the past and where we are today, the present. Currently, the tax collector's offices, your offices, we have 5 locations in Lake County. I think most of you are familiar with them. We have 1 in Lady Lake, 1 in Leesburg. We have 1 in Tavares, 1 in the Golden Triangle area, and 1 in South Lake County. We have 84 personnel in those offices that serve you. And you'll see where it wasn't always nearly 84. It was a fraction of that until just recently when we did a major hiring for new responsibilities that we got. The budget process for the tax collector's office, I think you'll find interesting. It's like none of the other 4 constitutional officers, nor the county commission or the school board. Here's how it works. The tax collector's office is considered a fee office. For the services we perform, the collection of taxes being one, we receive commissions for doing that. For other services we provide as an agent of the state of Florida, like the Division of Motor Vehicles, we receive fees for doing those services. Those collective commissions and fees are what I have to run the office. No more, no less. So as an example, this year the budget of our office is $5.5 million. My fees and commissions are $8 million this year. There's $2.5 million left on the table. At the end of the year, I distribute that back to the various taxing authorities on a pro rata basis, and I zero out our budget. That budget goes to the Department of Revenue each year for scrutiny. It's not considered, the services we provide are considered services for the state, not for the county. Property and tax administration is a state function, not a local function. And so our budget goes to Tallahassee for approval. The dollars that we come in, that $8 million in revenue, I have total authority to spend that money on our office in any manner that I can justify to the State Department of Revenue. Their position is that I have adequate funds to run the office to a level and quality that I deem appropriate. What do I deem appropriate? I deem what you feel is appropriate. The level of service that we provide is a level of service that we believe you expect from us. So we get that $8 million. You hear so often government needs to function within its means, needs to perform within its means. I would agree with that completely. We do exactly that. Not only do we function within our means, but we return literally millions of dollars each year to the taxing authorities. Is there any questions about the budget process? Because it doesn't fit in with any other local government.
The surplus, does it go to the general revenue to be reallocated by the legislature?
No. It goes to the local taxing authorities that pay commissions on a pro rata basis. The state gets nothing back. In fact, a large percentage of the monies that we bring in are through state services, like motorist services. They don't get a pro rata cut of it. It goes mostly to the county commission and various taxing authorities outside of the school board and the municipalities. They don't pay commissions. Any other questions about the budget? Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I'm a little dense. An example of some of those authorities, could you tell me?
Sure, and if you don't mind waiting 1 minute, I'm going to get to a lot of that stuff when we start talking about the quantities of work that we have and the volume of work. These are the duties and responsibilities of our office, of the tax collector's office. And this is where I'll cover some of that. We collect real estate taxes, as you know. Ad valorem and non ad valorem, collectively, we collect about $400 million a year now in the county. On the ad valorem side, we collect it on behalf of 26 taxing authorities. On the non ad valorem side, we collect it on behalf of 21 taxing authorities. Ad valorem taxes, you know them, the municipalities, the school boards, the county commission, St. Johns River Water Management Authority, the Water Management District. On the non-ad valorem side, with the exception of 5 or 6 non-ad valorem levies, and non-ad valorem levies are fixed amounts of money that have nothing to do with the value of your property, we collect almost exclusively, again with the exception of maybe 4 or 5, on special taxing districts, special legislatively constructed and created taxing districts, like mostly community development districts. Are you familiar with those? They're special purpose governments, but they actually have taxing authority. And so an example of that may be down in South Lake County, Greater Grove subdivision. It's governed by a local body existent within members of its own community. They have the authority to levy a non-ad valorem tax, a non-ad valorem assessment. And so we have roughly 17 or 18 of those within the county for whom we collect it. We collect those, and the proceeds we bring in and distribute back to them, we get 2% commission for doing that. So I don't know if I answered your question in terms of an example of a taxing authority.
Yes, you gave me some examples. Thank you.
Tax certificate sale we conduct each year. We conduct that electronically. Does anyone want to know about that process? It's rather detailed, and I would be more than happy to explain it. But at the end of the year, if your property taxes aren't paid, we sell a tax certificate on your property. And what that means is that's a process that goes, a competitive bid process in the free market, where if, for instance, Mark didn't pay his property taxes, we would sell a certificate at the end of May where you, as an investor, would bid a certain interest rate, and then you would pay his taxes. And the bidding on these rates starts at 18%, and you bid downward at 0.25%. So our sales are electronic now online, but you can get online, and you might bid 18%. I'm willing to pay his taxes, and I expect a return of 18% when he redeems that certificate and pays his taxes. Now what if he never does? Well, if he never does, you'll end up in the tax deed application process. And just for put it in context, this past year we sold 7,300 tax certificates. That's 7,300 people that didn't pay their taxes, and we ended up selling certificates. An interesting point with that is that if more people didn't pay their taxes in a timely manner, it's of greater expense to them in the long run because they're going to pay penalties, they're going to pay interest rates, and they're going to pay the cost to process all this activity. Government actually makes more money off of it. It's not only don't you paying early get a 4% discount, but your government makes more off of you through penalties and interest rates. So 7,300 of those, which totaled about $10 million in face value. The tax deed application process, if you buy Mark's tax certificate and after 2 years, Mark doesn't redeem that certificate and pay you the principal and the interest, a process then begins that will put that property up for sale. The minimum bid on that sale will be the amount of money that it will take to make you whole, plus some additional expenses for advertising and doing what we call an ownership and encumbrance report. But it's actually the cost of processing the transaction. And that's how you get your money back out. Any questions about that process? Yes?
You said after 2 years, so there's a whole other year of taxes.
There's a whole other year of taxes. And also, what I didn't add to that is, if you buy that certificate, in 2 years, you don't have to file that tax deed. You can hold on to that certificate for up to 7 years. It becomes invalidated after 7 years. But if you believe that you want, as an investment, and your interest rate is satisfactory to you, you want that interest earning to grow, you may wait till the 6th or 7th year to file a tax deed application.
But I guess my question is then there a third party, because I'm thinking if he hasn't paid his taxes for, let's say, 2014, he's not going to be able to pay his taxes for 2015. So there's somebody different that can buy that tax.
It's funny, people miss years and leave them out there.
Yeah.
They may pay in 2008, missing 9, paying 10.
Yeah.
Now, if you say you didn't pay in 12, but you did pay in 13, and now 14 rolls around, the person that holds that certificate still can file that tax deed application.
Right.
Because they've held the certificate for 2 years.
Okay.
And you still theoretically could end up losing your property for 1 year in the past.
Right.
Okay.
Bob, your 73,000, you said?
7,300.
Oh, 7,300. How is that in relation to history? You know, the annual. Is that a high number?
No, that's an average number.
Average number.
Probably fluctuates within a couple hundred of that.
Okay.
The downturn in the economy didn't impact that number much at all.
Okay.
And the reason it didn't impact it is when we think of the downturn in the economy and all the foreclosures, the people that were foreclosed upon are the people that are right on the edge financially anyway. They have a greater tendency not to pay the tax because they can't. If it's foreclosed upon, the bank has the obligation to pay it, and they're going to pay it. So again, the downturn in the economy really didn't affect those numbers.
Okay.
Yes?
How many tax deed sales took place in 2014?
624. They either took place or they're on the cusp of taking place in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
A face value of $2.7 million. Yes, sir.
A question for you. When you sell these, the mortgage on these has to be part of the funds, right?
It does not. Built into almost every mortgage, with few exceptions other than individuals that carry mortgages, are provisions, caveats to the mortgages that say failure to pay your property taxes are grounds for foreclosure or on the mortgage. So.
Right, but if there's a first mortgage on the property, I mean, if you sell it for $10,000 and pay the taxes, what happens to the mortgage holder?
Your mortgage does not survive the issuance of the tax deed. You're out of luck.
The mortgager.
The mortgages, right?
Okay.
Mortgage companies and banks pay very close attention to this process. If they have a single year of delinquency on the taxes, the bank will typically pay it, then come to terms with the property owner as to whether they're going to foreclose now or force the foreclosure at a later date or allow for a short sale.
What is the average interest rate?
The average interest rate on certificates, it was 5.7% last year. And that hasn't fluctuated a lot. Now, when we went from live sales to electronic sales in 2004, the interest rate went from an average of 12% down to 5 or 6%. We also went from If we don't sell a certificate, if it doesn't appeal to anyone to buy a certificate, because mind you, when you're buying a certificate, one of the things as the buyer, the bidder, you need to be cognizant of is the potential for it to be redeemed. And is the piece of property, if it's not redeemed, attractive enough that if we force it to sale, will there be a buyer? Is it reasonable to believe there'll be a buyer? And so all that has to do with free market adjustment of the rate. Anything more about certificates or deeds? When I'm done, I'm going to ask David to come up here and I'm going to ask you questions, but I don't know what
In front of all my bosses.
Moving past tax deeds, tangible personal property, we collect that, about $22 million we collected last year. We have about 7,400 tangible personal property accounts in the county. Most of that is related to businesses. The equipment that you have in your business that's not fixed to the building has a tax on it. It's called tangible personal property tax. The only thing in addition to that that is taxed as tangible property are what they refer to as accoutrements to mobile homes. You have a carport or a screen room, that's taxed separately on a mobile home. A few years back, 3 years I guess now, the state legislature wrote a law that exempted up to $25,000 on tangible personal property tax. So if you had a yard care business and you had lawn mowers that were valued a couple $1,000s, a couple of years ago, you would have paid tangible taxes. And tangible taxes are the same as ad valorem taxes, the same millage rate. So if the county millage is 5 mils and your tangible tax millage is 5 mils, with that exemption, all these small businesses now are exempt from paying that tax. Tourist development tax. We have 524 tourist development accounts in Florida, in Lake County. That means that if you have a piece of property, whether it's a hotel or a single family home, and you rent it for less than 6 months, you're responsible to be paying the tourist development tax. Last year we went to a totally electronic process for that, filing and remittance. It dramatically increased our collections. That money is distributed to the Tourist Development Council, who uses it to market the county. It's most recently used it for such things as building a softball complex in Claremont, a volleyball complex at Hickory Point, to attract these athletic events that are supposed to put, quote unquote, heads in beds and stimulate local sales tax. Business tax receipts, we have about 73, 74. Oh, business tax receipts, do you know what that is, first off? That's the old occupational license. Okay, and if this is a cause that you may want to take up, it's one that I have taken up before with the legislature and nearly got lynched in Lake County for it. But the business tax receipt, again, is the old occupational license. And what the statute says is that this is paid by businesses for, quote unquote, the privilege of doing business in the county. Now, if you think that small businesses or any business should be paying to do the privilege of doing business in the county, then we think differently. We pay tens of thousands of dollars in incentive money to businesses to come to Lake County. The first thing they have to do when they get here is bring me $30 and pay for the privilege. It's a discretionary tax. Some counties don't. Sumter County does not require it. Is it a lot of money for a business? No, it's $30. Is it a lot of money for the government? In Lake County last year, we brought in a little over $600,000. But there's a little thing that sneaks in there with this. It's annoying to a lot of people. It's called principle. The principle of this is you shouldn't be paying for the privilege to do business in Lake County. It's your county. Motorist services, the biggest part of our business, not in dollar-wise, but transaction-wise. It's a huge piece of the revenue of part of our budget. Last year we did over 500,000 motor vehicle transactions. 500,000. the vehicle and vessel registrations, disabled parking permits. We do about, this past year, we did 14,000 of them. The time, how time consuming that is amazing. As you know, some of you probably have these disabled parking permits. A couple of years ago, there was a huge class action lawsuit, and we cannot charge for them anymore. It was determined that under the Americans with Disabilities Act, that this is an entitlement, and so you don't pay anymore for it unless you have a temporary one, and it's $15. But anyway, we do 14,000 of those in a year, and each one of them is a relatively extensive transaction. Electronic filing services, that's something that we oversee that's a real point of contention with me, that has to do with the dealers being able to do your registration work when you buy a vehicle and giving you an original metal tag. The state, we were the last county in the state of Florida to do this. And we, up to the last day of the legislative session, we've, Mark, Randy, David, and I literally fought this in Tallahassee to allow dealers to do this. And not because we didn't think it was going to be convenient to the consumer, but because the two companies that did this in Florida, that provided the hardware and software to the dealers to do this, they were given the authority to write the rules governing it. And my position with 66 other tax collectors is you can't allow a private party who benefits from this financially to be writing the rules governing it, and they didn't set a cap on what the fee could be to do it. So we fought this. We ended up in a legislative, what's called a PAGA, which is the investigative arm of the legislature, giving testimony as to why this was so horrendous. And then shortly thereafter, the legislature acquiesced and decided that they would give the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles the authority to promulgate the rules as a government agency and not as a private entity. So that's the reason we were the last ones, that we were going to go down kicking and screaming. And we did, and we were able to get actually the laws and the rules changed. It was to the detriment of the consumer and to the benefit of two private entities. Florida driver license and ID cards, we just got into that business, and Randy's going to touch on that in a little while. When Andy and I first talked some time ago about our office and how we conduct our business, it was important to me that we have an opportunity here and elsewhere to convey to the public the complex detail that we go through to make what would otherwise appear to be simple decisions. The numbers of transactions that we'll perform for driver license service will more than double our business, double the number of transactions that we'll have to perform. And so when we set up an office in Claremont, the complexity of what it takes to do that. If you go into the average government office and say, there's 10 people behind the counter, why do you need 10 people? They'll say, well, that's how many we need. If you go into one of our offices and say, why do you have 10 people behind the counter? We will, through quantitative formulas, show you exactly, and Randy's going to do that tonight in a kind of an abbreviated version, show you why we do what we do in every facet of our business. When somebody challenges us as to why we spend money, why we hire this number of people, why we have these various systems in place, we can tell you with tremendous specificity exactly why we're doing what we're doing. And we have every expectation that that's what you want from us. Government can be held accountable, and it makes the job, makes my life so much easier. Because I'm not walking around avoiding people asking tough questions. So the DL piece of it we'll get into again. We're still at odds with the state over this. We're one of the last counties, in fact, we will be the last county to get into this completely. And it's another one of those things that it was 66 tax collectors encouraging the legislature to let them do driver's licenses because they said it would be a benefit to the customers, to the citizens of their county, and I'm on the other side saying, stop, stop. You can't be this good to the citizens of your county. And the reason you can't be this good is because the state gave us the responsibility to do this and zero revenue for doing it. They eventually acquiesced and allowed us to charge a $6 surcharge, but that's $6 more you have to pay than you would have to pay otherwise. The state still gets the full fee. And so I asked my fellow tax collectors, how can you possibly say this is in your taxpayers' best interest? Because I can tell you in Lake County, if you told one of my taxpayers that this is a good deal for them, that the state still gets their whole cut, does nothing, we get nothing and subsidize it through other means at their expense, they're going to tell you it's not a good deal. So we're going to be the last county to do this, and it won't happen a total transition until May, the end of May of this summer. Online services, these are the things you can do through online capabilities, e-commerce, your tax payments and vessel and renewals, motor vehicle renewals. I don't want to be a naysayer, but here's another example of what we deal with. Last year, the State Department of Division of Motor Vehicles said, let's start doing central issuance. When you come into the tax collector's office, you'll do all your paperwork, we'll mail a tag from Tallahassee. The substantial savings with that over a period of time, because our need locally for less bricks and mortar facilities, is a staggering number. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. 66 tax collectors said this would be a disservice to our customers not to allow this always to be done at a local level. And once again, we say, if you can do it for a fraction of the cost, whatever inconvenience might come with that, at least the taxpayers in Lake County, they're good with it. Save them money. If they have to wait 3 more days to get this in the mail, I think they'll be okay with it. And we lost that argument. Hunting and fishing licenses, last year we did about 2,000 of those. That's another one of these services that should be done exclusively in the private sector. It's a state mandate for us. Walmart sells them, fishing bait tackle shops sell them. They have the customer base to do that. It ought not be a government function. They remit the money electronically to the state just like we do. Customer information call center, a huge part of our operation. We have on any day 3 to 6 people doing that. We have a phone bank. They answer your questions, your concerns. We direct people. We kind of consider ourselves the ombudsman of local government. Somebody has a problem, they don't know where to find a solution, they don't know what agency to go to, call us, we'll steer you that way. Last year we fielded 135,000 phone calls.
Wow.
More than all other agencies put together. But it's a service that we provide that people seem to love. Most of the questions are about now driver's licenses or where do I get my vehicle registered, things that are basic questions, but it's amazing how many people just don't know where to go when they have a problem. And kind of pride ourselves on being the one that's going to steer you. How we do it. These are my 3 areas, primary focus areas. Fiscal accountability, systems management, and customer service. That's what we're all about, those 3 things. That's the things we think about day in and day out. With fiscal accountability, people wonder, in my particular case in our office, how do we know what you're doing financially, fiscally, that you're compliant, you're doing what you're supposed to do? We're audited more than any other agency in the county. The Department of Revenue audits us, the Department of Highway Safety audits us, and then we have the same external auditor that the county and the school board don't have the same auditor, but they have the same type, the same concept of external auditors. We have all of those. Next bullet is the Florida Tax Collectors Association in 2011 decided that it was going to take upon itself to evaluate, analyze the different financial operations of the 67 tax collectors' offices based on a variety of different considerations, the cleanliness of your audits, your cashiering responsibilities, your checks and balances, your customer service deliveries. That year, 12 tax collectors' offices out of 67 received this award. We were one of them. Since that time, they've done the award 12, 13, and 14, and they now refer to that award as the Legacy Award for anyone who has received it multiple years. There's about 6 or 7 counties now that have received it in the 4 consecutive years since its inception, and Lake County is one of those. And so we believe it's an area where we can say that to this degree, through these audits and these analyses, that we're actually responsible and compliant and doing the job the way we think you expect us to do it. Systems management runs the gamut from human resources systems, information systems, tax administration, accounting, And the last three are state systems that we have to manage, from DL to motor vehicle to the game commission. And part that this all has to do with the issuance of the various permitting, licensing, titling, the reconciliations of those accounts, the disbursement of revenues to the state, the timeliness of those disbursements. And so again, and then we're audited on those. Customer service is, I believe, our hallmark. I can stand up here all day and tell you that the service we provide in our office is second to none, but I trust your judgment more than I would trust what I have to say. If you've been in one of our offices, I would be extremely surprised if your experience in that office wasn't stellar. That the people who served you didn't make it clear to you that they worked for you. I believe if you have been in our office and you have conducted any business at all, you have had a better experience than you may have expected. We pride ourselves in that. Let me say that the people that we hire bring two things to the table with them, and it's the absolute most important thing in the interview process, and we're well aware of what we can and can't ask in an interview. We're well aware of what Fair Labor Standards allows us to do, the questions we can and cannot ask. You spend 2 hours with an interviewee, and during that period of time, they don't mention their family and their faith to you, you better question their values. Because when you ask somebody what the most important things in their life are, which is a question you're allowed to ask, and leave it open-ended, they're going to tell you the things you want to hear, and you're going to determine whether or not they really have a servant's heart. If they don't demonstrate that they have that servant's heart through one way or another, they're not going to work in our office. The people that come to work for you, you can't teach them to care, and you can't teach them to want to serve. They bring it to the table with them. And so those are the kind of people we have working with us. Again, I use this phrase lightly, but I'm blessed that day in and day out I work with people to make me feel better about myself, to make me feel that I want to go out, I want to serve the public. The best part of our job, the best part, is that we get to meet people who have problems outside the scope of what we do, and they're asking us for help, and it gives us an opportunity to step outside and help them. We have people actually leave work on occasion during the course of the day because they've heard a staff, what otherwise would be referred to as a sob story from somebody that's having great difficulties, and they've left with them. They've gone home with them to try to help them. I've seen Dave and Randy go out on a weekend and help an elderly woman in Cassia put up back her fence or a front door that's fallen off of her mobile home that's in pieces. I mean, people going to the extremes of committing themselves and devoting themselves to their public service. We've got 84 of them. Well, they'll say 83 because that question we used to. Customer service is awful.
Just leaving me out.
Business analysis. Randy? This is the part of our business that may be a little bit dry, but I want you to see the detail. When we were opening the South Lake driver license office, and we didn't know how many people, we didn't know what office space we need, we didn't know the numbers of transactions, the times required. How do you come to those terms? Randy has been a godsend in running these numbers out and Mark and implementing it all. So Randy, if you would, explain why and how we do that.
Certainly, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be in front of you and to share a little bit of an insight on what it is that we do on a daily basis. And we're just, I know we are, Mark, David, and I, we're just so blessed to have Mr. McKee to work beside him, his intellect, his business savvy, and most of all, his servant's heart. It is just, it's a blessing to be around you. And I greatly appreciate the opportunity. You know, a few years ago, the legislature, in their infinite wisdom, decided, all right, driver's licenses is going to be performed by tax collectors. And then through that process, as Mr. McKee's already shared with you, it was sort of one of the last ones, but there's a reason for that, because of the little remittance that we get for performing the transaction, and they're time consuming. But nonetheless, it's legislatively mandated, so we're going to go at it with a servant's heart, but we're going to do it with some business savvy as well. And so Mr. McKee challenged us, and me specifically, to, okay, how many people do we need? And then of all the other things, the laundry list that I had to go out and gather, how many transactions does the state perform? What kind of transactions do they do? How long do they take to process? What's the migration patterns of folks that come in and out of Lake County to get their work done? Because we're surrounded by Orange County, which is huge. There's millions of people over there, and they filter over to Lake County to get their work done. Same thing in Osceola and Polk, and then to a degree Marion County. And so we looked at all these migration patterns and trying to figure out what the best guess was and how many people are going to be coming through our office, what they're going to be doing, and how long it's going to take us to get it done. So we started out. We looked at an aggregate number of transactions over a period of years. We got a handy-dandy pie chart I learned how to do over and over again several years ago. I'm not too bad at it now. I'm more of a bar graph kind of guy now. But anyway, what was going on in our South Lake office, or in the South Lake DL office, because that was going to be the office that the state closed first. If you're familiar with it, it's just a little bit past this. It's 1.8 miles south of the Citrus Tower. It's a little plaza called right before Stormy Hill, Harley Davidson. But anyway, they've been set up there for a few years, but they were going to get out, and they were going to shut services down in October of 2013, and so we had to get rolling. So we didn't know anything about driver license services whatsoever. So, you know, we can read books, we can read the transition plan that the state put together for us, and even though that we're one of the last ones to transition, the information that came forth from the state was still very, very poor. I mean, you'd think they'd be experts at transitioning their level of their services to the tax collectors, but still, by the time we got it, they didn't have anything much to share with us. So we were out on our own, and that was okay. I was good with that. So anyway, so we looked at what kind of services were provided in the Claremont driver's license office that the state provided. And so most of them were Class Cs, which is the typical license that you and I have. And then followed by the IDs and some receipts. I won't get into the minutia of it, but anyway, that's sort of an overview of the kind of transactions that were being processed down in Claremont. Then we had to associate a reasonable amount of time to each one of these types of transactions. Well, the only way to do that, in my simple mind, was to give me a clipboard, a piece of paper, a stopwatch, and I embedded myself into the Astatula office.
Oh, really?
Yep. But there's some good people in there, for the record, and we got them. But yes, I felt your sentiment before I went in there, and believe me, to this day, we have grown men, older than I am, younger than I am, bigger than I am, begging us to please go into the Astatula office with them so they'll be treated nicely. It's crazy. And there's no sense for that. I mean, it doesn't cost any more to smile and be helpful to somebody than it is to not be mean-spirited, but nonetheless, everybody's bad days, but nonetheless, we sat in there, David and I did it for an extensive period of time, weeks and months. Transactions, folks would come up, I'd stop and watch, and then when the customer was done, okay, what was it they were doing? Okay, so they were doing a revocation and they were paying you money to get the driver's license back. Okay, well that was 15 minutes. Okay, chart that down. And then we did that over and over and over and over again. And not only did we do it in Astatula, we did it in Claremont to see if there was a difference in the numbers, or the difference the way, you know, because you can go from office to office, and sometimes people process work a little bit differently. Somebody might be a little bit faster, somebody might be a little bit slower, you know. But we came through thousands of these transactions, we came up with these average processing times. And then we took these numbers and we took them to the state professionals and driver's licenses and said, hey, look at these times. Are we pretty much on the map? Or is this about right? And they looked at it and said, yeah, we're well within the norms of processing a driver's license transaction. I mean, an original Class C is 20 minutes. On a good day, it's 20 minutes. That's somebody coming in from out of state, from Michigan, and now you got the Real ID Act. You got to get the gold star, and you got to prove who you are, and you got to have address verification, you got to have a birth certificate, you got to have all kinds of crazy things that the federal government, the Department of Homeland Security requires of us to get before I can issue a driver's license. even though I've known you, right, for 40 years. And you've lived in Altoona, Umatilla, Leesburg. You say, hey, I've lived here almost all my life. I know most everybody. And guess what? I can push all these buttons on these keyboards. I still can't get a driver's license out for you because I got to have those documents. It won't go through unless I got to scan something. But anyway, we did all that. We went through, there's the average processing time. Then we looked back again to what it was that they did in Claremont, associated processing time, and then came up with a, simple math, total processing time, 652,360 minutes it took to process a little over 43,000 transactions. So Mr. McKee said it's going to double our book of business. Absolutely right. In terms of time, because time is money, and it takes a lot of time to perform a driver's license service. It's crazy. And this is just the good stuff. This is the quick stuff. There's some things in there that I could just go on and on and give you fired up about driver's license. Woo. Anyway, get back to the original question. Hey, how many people we got to have? Well, if you know Mr. McKee, coming back to him and saying, yeah, probably about 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe. I don't know, the state says 8, maybe 8. That's not going to cut it at all. We got to have some empirical data to determine exactly how many people we need to provide driver license services in Claremont. So, okay, how do we go about doing this? Well, we decided, you know what, we're going to come up with a workforce utilization. And what in terms of that is, I just stuck some numbers that we had from our South Lake office over here across from the tower. We had 8 folks working in there, and we work a traditional 8:30 to 5 Monday through Friday work week. And so we had 8 folks working in our tag office. And each FTE, full-time equivalent, this is one person, is budgeted in our budget for 1,950 hours. Okay? That's total budgeted hours for those 8 folks. It was 15,600. And then I looked specifically at the amount of time, right, that they are in our time clock. So if you go on a break, if you head out to lunch, if you go into training, if you work in a non-customer area, non-direct customer contact area like the mail room, all these things are broken out in our time clock, so we can see where people, we know where people are working at, but we can attribute our budget and assign money towards those particular positions. We get a lot of training. But anyway, we went in and looked at direct customer contact time was 13,351 hours that year. And so of that 1,950 budgeted hours, that came out to a little over 85.6% of our time was direct customer contact. That was making widgets. If you went to school and had professors talk about making widgets, that was widget making time. And so roughly it was 1,669 hours, and that's the 85.6%. And so we took that number, remember that number, 85.6, and then I looked at the customer volume. Remember the number that we had on the pie chart for how many transactions we did, the state did, and then we attributed the amount of time that we took to process those 43,748 transactions. And we came out with an aggregate of a little under 15 minutes per driver's license transaction. That's what it was going to take to process one driver's license transaction. So, how many folks can we move through in an hour if it was just one person working in an office at a rate of almost 15 minutes per customer? All right, 4.02 to be exact. That's right. So, all right, so we take the 402 and we looked at our operational hours, which is again Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5. We work 250 days a year, right? And so that comes up with our 21, 25 hours. And then I also looked at the amount of customers that came in through the office in that 21, 25 hours, and that was, we gave us what we call lambda rate. If you know about queuing theories, and we'll get into that a little bit, but our lambda rate, our arrival rate, is a little bit less than 21 customers per hour. So I'm going to have to use some links here so I can show you the handy dandy spreadsheet here. But in order to move those 20.58 customers that come through our office per hour, we need, based upon these inputs, 6.29 people working 100% of the time, never leaving the workstation, never going to the restroom, never go, no, we don't work that way. But you can see, okay, you obviously will need a little bit more at 6.29. And I want to show you something here. You know, one of the things that was really the most challenging was trying to find a benchmark on workforce utilization in a service industry that's similar to ours. Now, we reached out to some other governmental entities, other tax collectors across the state, never heard of it, much less aren't practicing any of it. We reached out, and then we started thinking, well, what in the private sector is similar to the tax collector office? And we come up with the banking industry, because they have tellers that are sitting behind a counter, and they have some quick transactions, and they have some extended ones. So you go in and you make some withdrawals, you make some deposits, you order some checks, and then there's some desks out there in the lobby where you might get an IRA, or you might get a new checking account so you can get that toaster. So there's some shorter transactions and some longer transactions. And so, okay, so the banking industry, okay. So we reached out to some of our banking friends locally. Hey, workforce utilization, how do you figure out how many tellers you're supposed to have? Never heard of it, never practiced it. It was just, that was the number. They got 4 booths, they got 4 tellers. That was it. So if there was a line or there wasn't a line, that's just what it was. And then like, okay, so, you know, you can usually find everything on the internet, you know, Google, Bing. Okay, workforce utilization, government, and you just hear like Mark's phone, it's crickets. There's nothing out there. So finally, we're digging through and we find this you got to find a reputable thing too. And we found this one organization, banking, BAI Strategies. It's a governing entity that looks at all of the financial institutions that operate in North America. And they did a study on workforce utilization. And they said that the benchmark, that a lot of banks operate around about the 50s and the 60% benchmark, which is really not very good because that means you're overstaffed. And then, but they realized that you can't have 80 and 90% workforce utilization because you'd just be running your people into the ground. It's crazy. And then you'd have long wait times too. So they determined that 75% was a good benchmark in workforce utilization, and 75% of any one given day during your work hour, that's direct customer contact. You're making widgets. So, but anyway, so we went and we looked at our workforce utilization in Claremont, and actually we were a little bit over. So, which was not really a surprise because that's an office that just cranks. But Mark, if you would, yeah, you could, thank you very much. Scroll up a little bit. I highlighted an area that's specific to really what I'm talking about here. Now this is BAI Strategies, and it says that it may not seem like a significant difference, but consider this. The worst performing branches in the study were at 64%. And the workforce utilization, which means that 36% of the teller's time is spent on non-volume activities. Of course, no bank can reach 100% workforce utilization because of auxiliary services, activities, such as balancing and opening and closing of the office. So our benchmark is 75%. And I read that, and I'm like, wow, that's basic. Because it takes a lot to open our office. Our office, you know, folks come in at 8:30, but believe me, we're there well before that, getting the machine running, and then we're there afterwards too, closing it down and reconciling it. A driver's license just adds a whole new gamut and a whole bunch more time to that, and that might be another meeting, right? We might need both Wednesdays and Thursdays. But anyway, so we put our inputs in. Mark, would you go to this available system capacity hyperlink, the 6.4? All right. So remember, we had our inputs of, we have an arrival rate, 20.58, right? Almost 21 people coming through the door per hour. We can serve 4 customers, a little bit more than 4 customers per hour, and we need it at 6.29, right? That's 100% of the time rolling, no downtime whatsoever. That's crazy. That put us at 81, a little bit under 82% workforce utilization. So, if you would go back from that, Mark. What we did is then we determined how we got to get down to 75%. And so, would you click on that? 75%. I believe that's the. I'm sorry. Probably this is the wrong one. 6.29. All right. Yeah. You see, we're at 81.3, but we had to figure out, okay, how do we get to 75%? So would you do me a favor? My mind is correct. Would you go in there and change that 6.29 to 6.83? 74.9546557. Okay, 75%. That's my benchmark. That's where I want. So I need 6.83 servers now to move those people through my office with a 75% workforce utilization. Okay. Now we can go back to the main street, please. Thank you, sir. So the difference between 6.29 and 6.83 is, well, math is right, 0.54. So we need an additional, almost a little bit more than a half hour worth of work of a person to work. All right, so we move that number forward. Thank you, Mark. Hand for Mark.
Hey, Mark.
We take that number forward, 6.29, and then we added the additional time to get to my 75% workforce utilization. I'm going to add a whole new person. Oh, what are we doing? We're growing here. But believe me, in driver's license, we need somebody who is sort of overseeing customer flow. You come in, hey, what you here for? Okay, you're doing a renewal, an original, a revocation, to get my suspension lifted. I got to pay child support off my driver's license, all kinds of different things. And so we need somebody, and we sort of jokingly refer to as air traffic control, because if you don't have somebody at the helm, at that reception desk, this isn't handing out number 1 and number 2 and number 3 ticket. This is knowing what you're there for and directing you to the right person to get it done in the quickest way. All right? So it's all about customer flow management. So we need one person to do that, because you just can't go into like the Publix deli and go to that big red cheese wheel and pull out the number. Not too long ago, the driver's license is just rampant with fraud anyway, but not too long ago, there was a system, there wasn't a queuing system in place, and one of the local tax collectors, they had folks coming into their office, and they would just go to specific deputies, clerks, whatever they called them over there, to get their work done. And they were bringing in people who are, let's just say, had nefarious intentions, and the deputy or the clerk, the customer representative, whatever you want to call them, they were getting some money on the backside to process these driver's licenses. Well, if you have a queuing system that just indiscriminate, so you get issued a number and then you are randomly sent to an individual, there's no way that you can, hey, Mark, I'm going to be coming in today with some of my friends from out of the country. I need you to get their driver's licenses for me. I can't do that. So now we have a gatekeeper in place. And all across, before we got this driver's license thing rolling, we went to several tax collector offices. What's your best practices? What are some of the things that you learned? What do we need to watch out for? This is a pretty scary thing here. And they said, a gatekeeper. You've got to have a gatekeeper. You've got to have somebody helping direct traffic that's a fraud deterrent. So that's sort of the genesis of this position, if you will, this role. It's not a manager. It's a person who's doing the directing. So we assigned 1 hour, one FTE to that. So now our total service hours to move those 20.91 people through our doors per hour, we need 7.83 total service hours. All right, well again, we're open 2,125 hours during the year. So that's a total number of service hours of 16,683, a little over 16,683. Again, remember that 85.6 back a couple slides ago? All right? And the average, that's not the average, the number is this 1669. That's the direct customer contact, making widgets, processing driver's license time, direct customer contact. And so if we do the simple math of dividing that 1669, which is the average number, or the aggregate of processing work, to those total service hours, it said that we need a little bit under 10 folks, 9.96. Everybody with me so far? Okay. It is crazy sometimes. But what we have is like, okay, so that's 10 folks. But what we thought was we would purchase a queuing system and start leveraging technology in hopes that maybe we wouldn't need 10 people. So we recommended that we just draw back or scale back 1 FTE, and then we would install some queuing software, and let's just reevaluate and see how we did. Because if we're shorthanded, we can always go get somebody else. But if we're got too many people, well, you just can't kick them out of the door. That's not right. So anyway, so we went to 9, and it's been perfect. We just celebrated yesterday our 1-year anniversary in Claremont providing driver license services. And it's been exclusively at the helm of Mr. Mark O'Keefe, and it has done perfectly. Matter of fact, it's got better benchmarks. We're going to have to reevaluate this whole thing now because of him. This is wonderful. But what he's done is we purchased this queuing software, but what Mark has done is helped redirect some of that, the queuing to direct folks that come in with some rather complicated transactions. Let's just say we had 9 people working at the counter, and 9 people come in with what we call the T-tickets trouble. Okay? And they got revocations, suspensions, DOI interlocks. They're convoluted, crazy, time-consuming transactions. Okay? Imagine if 9 of those folks, and that's not uncommon for 9 trouble tickets to come in pretty quickly together. Imagine if they all came in and then you're sitting behind them, all you want to do is a renewal, which is about 10 minutes. You're going to be there forever, and you're not going to be very happy, and rightfully so. So Mark's got a great way of redirecting people. Like he's just got 2 or 3 people that do nothing but T-tickets, and then he's got another handful of people that do nothing but the in and out quick stuff. So you don't get stuck behind somebody who's there with a really lengthy transaction. So when you come into our driver's license office in Claremont, and now we have one in Leesburg, and it's a regional service center, it's not a first come, first serve anymore. All right, we have a designated number of folks that handle the type of transactions that you're coming in for. And if you're doing your tax payments, we want you in and out because you're paying the bills. See you. Come in, have a good day. All right, if you're there causing trouble, you're going to be there a while. Yeah. And it's just, we're going to pay attention to you. We're going to get you squared away, but you can't be holding up the line. You've got to move people. And it's customer flow management. And so Mark's done a fantastic job down there. And just recently, the state, Mr. McKee was referring about being audited. Well, we were audited by the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles and our driver's license. They looked at every one of our transactions that Mark and his gang down there in Claremont processed. Flawless, spotless. And Mark is a great hands-on manager. He is right there, I would almost say 24/7. It's not really that far off. He is there crazy amount of time. But you know what? That's what it takes sometimes to get the job and get it done right. And that's what you got to do. And Mark, again, has done a wonderful job. A couple other things that Mark's done too. This is the Mark moment here. But I tell you, when we were going across the state of Florida, going to tax collector offices, and they were talking about fraud, it was really scary. And identity theft was up there as well. Folks would come into the tax collector's office with their fancy little smartphones and just sit in the lobby and just record all the nice personal information because you and your 9 closest new friends, you're talking about your epilepsy, you're giving your social security number, you're giving your address, you're talking about you want to be a Republican, Democrat, or an NPA, and they're just sitting there recording. And then they're stealing your identity. So we said, okay, we're not going to do this. We're going to separate the lobby from the work area. We can't really do that in Claremont because of the logistics of the building. We're doing that in Leesburg, and we'll eventually do that in Claremont. But what Mark came up with, another best practices that we found going out to the tax collector's offices is an application. You know, the law refers to, you got to make application for title, vehicle, you got to make application for driver's license. So guess what? Every question that I have to ask you about getting your driver's license is all right here in this handy dandy application. And the really neat thing about it is you can go to our website, you can print it off, it's in PDF, or you can complete it right online, print it out, come into our office, because you don't get a number to get served until this is completed. And then this way, tomorrow, you can't come in and say, hey, I told you I wanted to be a Republican and you chose a Democrat. No, right here it says DEM and you checked it. Or many other things that, you know, sometimes people can change their mind and then they want to blame you. Well, you know what? We do make mistakes. And when we make them, we own them, we fix them, and we move on. Right? But also, what was the really good thing about this application is that the lobby was quiet. Yes. You know, I mean, it was for I'm not listening to Dee Russell and her sharing her personal information. And she's got somebody that she doesn't know right to her right or right to her left. It's right here, sitting on the desk with one of our customer reps, looking at what you've filled out, putting it into the database, and then ultimately, if that's what you're for there, it's for an issuance of a driver's license or an ID card. A few minutes later, it's being printed out. And really, I mean, that's not to say it doesn't take the place of greetings and a pleasant exchange between two individuals. It just keeps your personal information as confidential as possible. You know, we're held to be through the Driver Protection Act. We have to keep your information confidential, and we have databases and systems that help us do that. But it's hard to keep your information confidential if you're having to broadcast it. And so it was just sort of a way for us to be able to keeps an office quiet so that you can hear, because you get 50, 60, 70 people in an office, it can get pretty loud when people start trying to talk over each other. But Mark's done a wonderful job down there. Mark, is there anything I need to add to sort of to put the bow on this and start asking or answering questions? Again, great job. Mark's done a wonderful job down there again, and he's helped tremendously with our new office in Leesburg. I mean, the design of it, the flow of it, the queuing system, I mean, from the workstations and getting vendors in to do mock-ups and find out what people like, what customers don't like, what employees like, what employees don't like. We try to make this as, you know, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right, but we're going to do it smart too. And so ultimately, we just hire 9 people. All that to say that, we just hire 9 people. And guess what? We've done it well. We're moving more people through there, and you know, shortly we're going to be doing more transactions because the state will shut down their last office in Asatula in the end of May, and then we'll be providing exclusively driver's license services in Lake County. And I'm happy to say that because I see the outcome. I see what Mark and his gang do down there. They help people where you don't think they think they have no help. If they come to our office, we get you squared away. If we can't do it, nobody can. But can I answer any questions? Yes, Jim?
On the first slide where you had all the list of things that the office had to do,
yes,
there was one marked non-citizen. I just wondered what that was.
That's called a lengthy transaction. That's called Border Patrol.
You're talking about right here. Yeah, non-citizen. There are folks that come in. Obviously, they're not talking about illegal folks or whatnot, but I'm talking about folks that come in from out of country that are not a permanent resident or citizen.
Permit, a work visa,
that's correct. And so you have to have all of these different forms. And I'm not that well versed on all of the I forms that you got to have. Well, actually, we start our immigration.
But I guess my question is, so you're issuing a driver's license to the people that are here that have an identity card that allow them to be here legally to work or live?
That's correct. We are processing the information, but their driver licenses are centrally issued. Once they verify the information that we put in the system and authenticate the documents that we scanned into the system, they will send the driver's license. What I do is print out a temporary driver's license for it. You can't use the right purposes.
Who's they?
The state. Tallahassee. Yes, sir.
You know, I see all your numbers and you've got all these averages, and I guess that's good if everybody came in 20 an hour.
That's correct.
But let's compare this to Interstate 4. If you took all the cars that travel through there and you divided it evenly 24 hours a day, then they probably wouldn't have to make changes to it. But everybody uses it at the same time, and there's rush hours.
Correct.
So how do you take into consideration if you got 50 people coming in an hour and you could only do 20?
Well, that's a good question, but it's what else is there to go by using, all I can use is the aggregates. Now, 50 people come through our office, and they, not 50 don't, but there are rush times, that's for certain. There are
Certain times of the month, certain times of the
summertime when kids are out of school,
Right.
man, slammed, okay? Christmas vacation, slammed. Thanksgiving vacation, slammed. But guess what? Here's the beauty of this. We have, if Mark needs additional assistance, like on road tests, because road tests are lengthy transactions, he's got 84 friends. I'm an examiner, David's an examiner. We have examiners in every one of our offices that can go down there and help him.
You mean the highway patrol does not give the driver's test?
No, sir.
Well, really?
That's correct. We do.
Full time.
We do. And so,
In addition to that, we have so many types of transactions, activities that are not occurring at the front counter. And we have people in the back of that performing these, doing dealer work, and similar activities. We consider the customer at the front counter to be a time-sensitive transaction. Get them in and get them out. If we get a backup in the queue, we'll pull the people from the non-time sensitive areas, have them serve the customers, and move them back. Of course, one of the things that Randy and Mark wrestle with all the time is that every 2 weeks when we do payroll, the first thing I look at is overtime, and I don't expect there to be any. And so how they manage that is their business, but there isn't going to be any.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I was thinking also, Randy, sorry, the Q flow software that you and Mark recommended to Mr. McKee and I with the purchase of that. Now that we have, to answer your question, I see a lot of data produced by both of them. And we can start trending and seeing these things because, as Randy pointed out, we pioneered something here basically, and so we had to have things in place to measure so that we could go back and put that against our plan. And as we roll out our next transitions, we'll have that data that they've collected to apply to our next business decisions. So our next ones will be better than these.
So does anybody in other tax collection agencies or counties, do they come to you and say, how are you doing it right?
Oh, sure.
Absolutely. Even though they've been doing it longer than us. But we have best practices, and we learn from practices that also, we can do this a little bit better. You know, but on the overtime issue, almost every tax collector, I don't want to get into the alls and nevers, but a lot of tax collector offices, when they got the responsibility to provide driver's license services, was inundated with overtime. I mean, it just blew their budget out of the water, all right? And we're not immune to that. But we are so sensitive to it that here's we got trends. And so, between 8:30 and 10, it's not that busy, but between 11 and 2, it's really busy, but it sort of drops off about 3. So guess what? We get real ingenious with folks' schedule. And they love it too, because guess what? They get to come in a little early or come in a little bit late, depending on what's happening, if it's holiday time. But let me give you an example. Lunch hour is super busy. So we'll have folks that come in the morning time's not that busy. So but we'll have folks come in instead of 8:30, we'll come in around 9 or 9:30, okay? And then they'll work the majority of the lunch hours when everybody else is on the traditional work schedule, if you will, are out at lunch. So we have more coverage at lunch so we can get more people out. And then those folks, if I have a late customer because they came in at 9 or 9:30, well, they can stay a little bit later while the other person who came in at 8:30 is going to get off on time. You see, so you're going to get your 7.5 hours worth of work in. I just don't know if it's going to be between 8:30 and 5 or if it's going to be between 9 and 5:30. Or some variables to that. But we're very sensitive to overtime. But we're very sensitive to folks standing in our lobby. We get anxiety about it. ooh, don't like it. And then, so it's all hands on deck. You know, if you've ever been to CVS or Walgreens and you stand in line, there's 3 or 4 people, and somebody gets on the phone on the intercom system and says, I see 3, I see 3. You ever hear that? That's because there's 3 people in line. Well, we don't get that way on their intercom system because, you know, people who are in tune to what's going on in your office and have, as Mark said, great situational awareness. Everybody knows what goes on. Everybody gets on deck. And everybody scrubs the deck and gets it done. Then customers are out, and then it's back to doing sometimes, you know, back office work and processing, you know, paperwork that's got to get to the state because we got reports, we got quality assurance, we got to distribute money to the state. All kinds of things going on. Yeah, Andy.
The data that you capture for Real ID, where's it go?
The data that I capture for Real ID. So are you talking about the
Scans.
the scanned birth certificate, the scanned to proof of background
The stuff that you didn't used to have to,
Goes-
stuff that you used to just present, and somebody would look at it and approve it, you now scan that stuff.
Yeah.
Where does it go?
Exactly.
Yeah, it goes into the Florida driver's license issuance system. It's FIDLess, and it goes to Tallahassee. But your question is, well, who else can look at it besides
Right.
Tallahassee?
Yeah.
Well, that's the wonderful Department of Homeland Security, your federal government.
So the state and the feds both get a shot at it. Got it.
So every state has to do this?
Yes, they are required by law to become federal Real ID compliant. Florida was one of the first ones to get on board. There's about a dozen states that are somewhat balking at it, but ultimately, you know, I guess the big threat of Real ID from the federal government is that once if you're not going to be Real ID compliant, you're not going to have access to federal facilities. Okay, you can't go in a nuclear power plant, no big deal for you probably, or me. But the threat sort of is that you can't get on an airplane either.
But some states allow illegal aliens to get driver's licenses. So is there a different procedure for that state? Because they don't have birth certificates, they don't have...
Excuse me, Randy, I was thinking, Mr. McKee and I had the opportunity recently to meet with the executive director of DHS&V, and not to redirect, I think Mr. McKee may want to chime in on this one. Is that all right? Sure. Well, we had recently met with Terry Rhodes, who's appointed by the governor and cabinet to run this whole agency. And I would say walking away from this lady and other folks there, and I'm not going to expound too much on my bragging on Tallahassee as a collective body, but there are some other public servants, as Mr. McKee has spoken about, that do take their job serious. And this lady is definitely one of those who has a history of an honorable career and also has a real passion for the public's consideration of things. She's just not a total bureaucrat. So I think some of that stuff, it was, I guess another positive on that was Mr. McKee's ability to reach out. He doesn't stay in his office, he go out to reach out to these things we have this involvement with, because Andy's question brings up a big concern, big brother issue. And there's some of that stuff it's already in play that's beyond all of us. But in the sense of that fellow there that you elect to be your tax collector has the relationship with the lady that's got the key to that box. Is that plainly put? Yeah. And I mean, a real relationship like a phone call just the other day. I would say most of the tax collectors do not, and I know almost every one of them, so it's pretty fair without exaggerating, do not have that degree of relationship. And when I mean relationship, I mean an appropriate, healthy, respectful, honorable relationship. And that extends further into other areas. And that's another thing with these state agencies. He is your agent here. And that is another beauty of the constitutional solvent state of his office he holds for you, is that he's in that way of that for you. So he says, call while we come out. Sorry, so I just wanted to pitch that over. Because he wouldn't say that of himself.
Well, I'll wrap it up here, but if you have, I'll be here for a while, so if you have any questions, we'll be more than happy to answer them afterward. All right, Mr. McKee, thanks for
You might have gathered the purpose of that was to show you that what we do on your behalf, we take real seriously. and we apply what we believe to be an intellectual approach to things. We don't just quote-unquote wing it. Your question about do other counties come to us, I would like to be able to share with you the number of things that we do for other counties on behalf of the state, where we serve as a pilot or a model for others, that others have emulated us, from the development of software to best practices within the office. And if I stood here and told you the litany of those things, I would win disfavor with you, because you'd say this guy's all about himself. So I'll spare you that, but it's never ending, the opportunities that we have to do this for other people and for other jurisdictions. Never ending.
Why isn't there one person over all of them, so all this can be spread out evenly across the state?
That's called big government.
There is the Executive Director of the Department of Highway Safety for motorist services, and they provide rules and regulations, parameters, but within those they expect the local elected officials to exercise discretion based on the needs of its unique community. And so there is uniformity, but how we deliver those services, that's between you and me.
Well, so if we get a good tax collector, that's good for us. If we get a bad one, that's bad for whoever gets it.
That's
so
correct.
Why doesn't the government, why doesn't Tallahassee have somebody that looks at all of them and says, this works here, and it would work over here just as well? So let's save the taxpayers some money by spreading this out. If it works, spread it out across the whole state. Don't let 67 people come up with a different answer to the same problem.
A different approach, how I run my business in Lake County, your business in Lake County, versus how it has to be administered in Dade County, the worlds apart. The Dade County tax collector is not even elected. That office is wrought with difficulties. And so the idea behind the Constitution is give that local authority to a local official. What the legislature passes on to this local official in terms of duties and responsibilities is it the wisdom of the legislature. So the legislature picks out these different activities, like motorist services, and says, we believe you can provide that service better at the local level. We'll provide the umbrella in terms of rules, regulations, statutory requirements. But how you provide that service is up to you. If you go to Orange County and you want to get your tag renewed, you're going to wait an hour. If you come in our office, you're going to wait less than 10 minutes. If you go to, well, a host of other counties, and I'll pick on Orange County because there's nothing about what goes on there when I approve of. If you go to the driver's license office in Orange County, we are inundated in Lake County with people coming from neighboring counties to Lake County because they'd rather drive an hour than wait 2 hours there. Happens all the time. In fact, we're looking right now at, depending on the cost of these things, whether we should limit the service, the provision of services in Lake County, exclusively to Lake County residents.
You're not now?
No.
No.
Not yet. You go to any county.
No, we had to go get our driver's license in Astatoula, so we ended up going to Lake Mary.
Well, you could have done it in Claremont or Leesburg. I'm not sure when you got it done, but.
What's wrong with Astatoula?
It's a third world country. And that's being kind.
For less cost,
It was a
using
hit.
our Claremont office as an example, for less cost than the state ran the office in Claremont, our wait time, average wait time for the state, as best they can guess, is over 2 hours. It's 12 minutes in our office now.
You said one thing, how can a state office that's been elected since 1885 when the legislature put it in, how come all of them aren't elected the same way? The tax collector, you said Dade County's not elected.
Dade's a charter county, a charter created by the legislature, not even by the local voters.
So it's what you have here is nothing that's carried through all 67 counties.
That's correct.
Because it's a constitutional form of government.
Right. Each county, now, again, back to our first slide, if you believe in larger centralized government, then you make a good case. I don't believe in that. I believe in small, accountable government, accountable to you as the taxpayer.
Yes,
I promise you, if you go to Dade County and call the tax collector, the person answer the phone will laugh at you and say, you want to talk to who? I promise you, if you call my office and say, I need to talk to the tax collector, I'm on the phone in 5 minutes, or they're getting me and returning your call that same day.
I think,
Which way you want to be governed is up to you. You control that.
I think his point is that he doesn't want the big government controlling it, but he'd like to get the benefits.
The knowledge.
the
Through
knowledge.
all of the other stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that's, again,
I'm
that's
not saying that anything is wrong and to do everything a different way.
Yeah.
I'm just saying take the benefit and spread it out across the whole state, because that's got to make things cheaper for the taxpayer.
And that's, in theory, I think that's great, and I'm not thin-skinned with this, but that's the idea that if the federal government does something, they do it good. The states, all 50 states should look at that. Why should we have the breakup of that, and then why 67 counties? And the bottom line is, the more governance you can allow at the local level, the more responsive it is. I realize, and I realize that there's a need to have some degree of uniformity, and that exists. But where it doesn't exist is in the provision of services. In what services it does. Of all the things I showed you today, there's one on that entire list of services, duties, and responsibilities that's discretionary on my part. One. The rest are mandated by the Constitution and statute, and that's the collection of tourist tax. I have an interlocal agreement with the county commission that I'll collect it on their behalf. I don't have to do that. That's a state function by statute. But we do it less expensively than the state did it, and our range of collection is far broader in terms of the number of accounts we've generated. And so, again, back to I like governing at the local level.
Can I just add on that also, is you can give statutes and rules and everything to 50 people, and it's more the implementation of the people that makes the difference, I believe. I mean, you could tell all the counties that this is how you need to do it, but they're all going to implement it differently. And the ones that, I love our tax office. I never have any problems when I go into it. I like that. But I work in Orange County, and I have seen absolute nightmares just trying to get my tag renewed because I thought it'd be convenient to do it on my lunch hour. So, I mean, I think a lot of that is, and a lot of that, especially in a county where you can vote for those people, is that's the importance of paying attention to the job that they're doing. And if they're doing a great job, then you keep them there.
Right.
And that's our responsibility to make sure. And we sadly can't control the other 6 counties. So I think that's just, again, like he said, they can tell you what to do, but you have to implement the things that work. And you're not going to get everybody to do that.
Any other questions?
I just wanted to say, I think we're fortunate to have you and your entire team in place.
Thanks.
We'd be remiss as a Tea Party member to not ask about that excess revenue that's being doled out through, in my opinion, stealth funding of things we may or may not approve of. How can we stop that? And are the other counties have excess funding too, or are you just doing such a great job? That
Most do. Some don't.
That's a lot.
I would bet more than half do.
67 counties times what, 2 million, 2.5 million? That's a lot of money.
Some counties, it far exceeds that. We looked the other day at Orange County and 20 million.
We need. How can we keep returning that to the taxpayer? Because Tea Party stands for taxed enough already, and we need to spend less. And if we can cut spending, this may be one way we can take that excess money and return it somehow to the taxpayer.
Yes. Yes. And we've made this argument before, that it really doesn't become of value to the taxpayers for us to save it if we give it to another government agency to spend it.
Right.
I hate that idea.
But you'll see, using the county commission as an example, if you look at their budget, you will see as an inflow of revenue what's called an intergovernmental transfer. If there's $2.5 million in that line item, 2.4 of it's ours.
Is that a state statute, or is that a county commission directive?
The statute that does that's a state statute.
State statute, so it would have to be changed in Tallahassee
Right.
legislature level. And that would involve all the other 67 counties too?
Correct.
Then what would happen is you would open up a door for removing the separation of his office, which one of the biggest things any office has is the its ability to fund itself. Then you're beholden to some other entity that can then take the whole pot of money and go do whatever they want with
No,
it.
just
Wait
the
6
excess.
hours like
Just
just
the excess.
Just like they did with the clerk's office.
Where they created a corporation.
Yeah.
Well, the clerk's office used to be much like your operation in that it ran off its own revenues, created its own budget, and they relocated the budgetary review process to Tallahassee so that they could cull off the excess revenues from the clerk of the court's office. Because almost all of the 67 counties were generating a surplus, and Tallahassee didn't. I guess they wanted their finger in that surplus.
They wanted more money.
And if the legislature say do something, this excess money, they're not going to give it back to you.
Not ever going to give it.
Well,
What's on the horizon for us in 2015? Concealed weapon permitting. Last year we pushed a bill through the legislature to allow for county tax collectors' offices, if they so choose, to be the portal for concealed weapon permit applications. The state got to the position, through no fault of theirs, where they got such a backlog on concealed weapon issuance. And there was a long period of time where they extended the tenure of the license so that all, just hundreds of thousands, no, tens of thousands, these permits will become for renewal due at the same time. They couldn't possibly accommodate the renewal process. And so sometime probably in August, our office will start processing these permits where you come into our office and electronically we'll sit down with you, we'll input the data and then send it off, and hopefully it will substantially reduce the amount of time to get this accomplished. We worked on this with Marion Hammer, who is the executive director of the NRA, used to be the executive director of the national NRA. Marion is kind of the matriarch of the NRA in Florida. And so we worked with her. At first she was adamantly opposed to it, said no more government involvement in the issuance of these permits. It's an attack on the Second Amendment. We explained to her how quickly we can expedite these things and how actually, for lack of better terms, they'll put guns in people's hands quicker than under the current circumstance. And she was all for it. She actually lobbied it for us. So in August, we'll start that. Driver license transition plan completion, as Randy said, May 31st of 2015. All state driver license offices will shut down except in those the bigger charter counties, Dade, Broward, where they will privatize most of it. And so that's what's on the horizon for us. Are there any questions at all? I know we're way running over our time, but I do want to say this to you, and I want you to, of all the things I've said tonight, I think we've been pretty sincere in everything we presented to you, but I tell you this from my heart. It's been a real privilege for me to have the opportunity to serve you for the past 18 years. I mean, a real privilege. It feeds my family, it educated my children. It's a job that's far more than just a job to me. I believe that I've been devoted to it for you all that time. It's a blessing for all of us to have met